Hello comrades, the Honey Badger here with another guide. This time we're going to cover farming. So start your tractors and let's bring up the checklist. What research do I need? Are farms affected by pollution? What types of farms and fields are available to use? When does fertilizing, sowing and harvesting happen? What is the best harvester tractor to truck ratio? What is the difference between liquid fertilizer and solid fertilizer? How much crops to expect per acre? How to calculate how much acres do I need for a single factory? Now before we move forward, I gotta farm you a bit. So comment down below if this is cringe or sleek. Hopefully you're going to fertilize this with a subscribe and maybe harvest it with a like too. Anyway, let's move on to our first topic. So, what research do you need? Theoretically, you don't need any type of research to start farming. However, if you want to produce fertilizers locally, you're going to need to focus on two research groups. Namely, fertilization, then synthetic fertilizers to produce liquid fertilizer locally. And also you're going to need waste separation education over here. This is to help your citizens separate the biomass from the mixed waste effectively. This will allow you to use it to create solid fertilizers, and you're not going to need a waste separation plant to separate it. And that's all in regards to research. Let's move on to the next topic. Are farms affected by pollution? No, they are not. So slap farms in between industries and your city to fill up the empty space you have. So, what type of farms and fields you have? Let's start with fields. The only difference between fields is their size, respectively their acres. A big field is equal in acres with 3 medium fields. One medium field is equal in acres with 4 small fields. Therefore, when it comes to a big field, it's actually equal in size with 12 small fields. Now, moving on to farms. You have 3 separate types of farms. A small, a medium, and a large farm. The only difference between them is the amount of vehicles that they hold. The small one holds 6. The medium one holds 12. The large one that is from Early Start DLC holds 23. The big one that by default you have in the base game holds 30. One more thing to mention about farms, and this is important. Scrolling down to the very bottom, you got the Assign Fields button. What I recommend is to manually assign the fields over here, because the order is very important. Therefore, disable auto search and simply use the Assign Field button to assign your fields. This is important because you want your tractors to firstly focus on the big fields and then move on to the medium or small fields. Moreover, it can be a good way to control the traffic system by zigzagging the farms you've got so vehicles spend less time giving way when picking up the crops and delivering them to the farm. For example, you can make a pattern like this and avoid vehicles colliding into each other at intersections. Also, most likely you've seen many times online the format 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 4. These are some magic numbers which represent the harvesters, tractors and covered hulls ratios. In the next topic, we're going to explain what the fuck is about them and how to remember them logically rather than going 1, 2, 3 like you're dancing in the rain. Let's now start talking about a farming cycle. The first step in the farming cycle is the solid fertilizing. That happens when there are absolutely no crops. Also, this happens before sowing or right after harvesting. It cannot be done once the crops have been sown. Spreading solid fertilizer usually happens once all snow is gone. So for now I have snow on the map, so I don't need to fertilize it yet. So let's speed up time and check it out. In the default map, this can be started somewhere around 23rd February or so. So as we can see, snow finally stopped appearing, and now the tractors are finally going to fertilize the area. As you can see from over here, although I have 9 fields, only 2 tractors have left. This is because the fields already have 150% fertility. Just as I mentioned before, spreading the solid fertilizer can happen after harvesting if you have enough time before the snow starts hitting. So right now these tractors went over here and over here just because they aren't yet at 150% fertility. After spreading the fertilizer, somewhere around, let's say, 3rd of March or so on a default map, let's speed up time and see, they are going to start sowing. All the tractors started moving. Now notice something interesting over here. These tractors will go and sow the fields. However, these 2 fields over here still have a low fertility rate. Therefore, these tractors, instead of sowing, they are fertilizing. This means that you're going to delay the process for these 2 farms over here. Let's speed up time and let's see what happens right after sowing. After sowing is done, the tractors will return back to the farm. Or if they still have enough fuel left, they're gonna go to another field. It doesn't matter if the tractor reaches the field with 0 fuel. It will continue sowing until it's finished. So as we can see, now that the solid fertilizer over here is done, this tractor will start doing the sowing on this field, and it will continue onwards until it fully finishes. Moreover, as you see, let me pause the game a bit, this dark spot represents where the tractor finished solid fertilizing. As you noticed, he didn't do the entire field because he reached 150% fertility. Therefore, when it comes to fertilizing, there is a very high chance that the tractors will not need to do the entire field to reach the desired fertility. The maximum fertility you can have with any fertilizer, if you have only one single fertilizer, is 150%. After sowing, you are going to notice that, let's see, these guys are still sowing. Okay, perfect. These guys finished sowing, and right now they are using liquid fertilizer after sowing to increase the fertility rate. The maximum fertility you're going to have is 200%. Let's watch this tractor over here reach the 200%. Moreover, during sowing, the plants grow normally. As you can see, the growing process is increasing over here, even if they are fertilizing. And here we go. Now the soil fertility is 200%. We have successfully doubled our future harvest. As you can see, the sowing and the fertilizing usually is done by the end of April, so it takes 1 month to do the entire field. Please note that these are not the best tractors you have. One of the best tractors is from the US side. But if we check over here, this is the best tractor with sowing speed 38. The ones that I'm using is this one over here from Czechoslovakia that has sowing speed 28, so 10 less. Of course, better tractors, faster sowing, so you might be done by middle or end of March. It's not such a huge difference to motivate the need for anything else. Now let's move on to harvesting. When it comes to harvesting, it happens when the growing process reaches 100%. This usually happens by end of July, beginning of August. These dates are important over here since once the growing process is done, the harvesters will kick in. Now, if you remember the 1-2-3 rule, we have one harvester for each 2 tractors. This translates in one harvester for each 2 fields. As you notice, the harvesters now will start doing the harvesting. And of course, together with that, vehicles, covered hulls, will start picking up the crops to deliver them to the farm itself. One more thing to notice over here. This vehicle over here finished picking up the... Actually, one more thing. If you want to see the amount of crops on each field you have, you can go to overlays, always show overlay to have it permanently on, and then go to resources, crops. And now you can see the resources on the fields themselves. Now, as you see, this one over here, Sakoi Big Field 4, the truck picked it up and now another truck is incoming. Well, this is for Big Field 2. Let's see which one is for Big Field 4. Still Big Field 2. Let's see where's the one for... Well, I guess for this big field they didn't arrive, but as you saw, 2 vehicles can be sent to a single field. The loading over here is only 1 vehicle slot. Therefore, the vehicles will wait at the end of the road until it's turn to do the field. Therefore, you can have a maximum of 3 hulls, basically 1 loading, 1 waiting over here, and 1 en route from the factory itself. That's the 3 from the 1, 2, 3. Now, what happens if the fields are longer? Basically, it takes more time from the farm to reach the fields. Well, in that case, you can have up to 4 covered hulls en route. Basically, you can have a covered hull picking up the crops from here, then a covered hull waiting over here, then a covered hull running along from the farm to the field, and a 4th covered hull going from the field to the farm. That's where the 1, 2, 4 comes from. Let's speed up the process and wait for my 4 harvesters to finish the field. The first set of fields, the first 4 set, is already done. Notice the time, it's 30 August. This means that we still have time to harvest other fields too. So let's wait for the harvesters to start doing the other fields. As you can see, harvesting is done at the moment, and the timing is 5th October. When it comes to normal default maps, you have until the end of November to finish all of this harvesting. In this scenario over here, I could have implemented 4 or 8 more medium fields to be harvested in the month that it's still remaining, and I could have gotten a bit more crops. Now let's wait until the end of November and see that this is the case. One more mention over here, because all of the fields are still at 150% fertility, our tractors don't start spreading solid fertilizer. Usually, the solid fertilizer is done in the first year. Afterwards, fertility rarely drops below 150%. And now that the snow is starting, theoretically, all of the tractors and all of the harvesters will go back to the farm. In case you left crops in the field, these will start dying out and it will act as solid fertilizer. This is yet another way how you can actually fertilize without solid fertilizing. Just leave some crops on the field remaining. Now let's move a bit to Siberia, since that is a bit different. When it comes to Siberia, things are a bit different. Basically, the sowing process happens somewhere at end of April, beginning of May. It follows the same principle as in the default map. Basically, the fertilizing and sowing happens once the snow is finished, which usually happens somewhere around middle of May, somewhere around there. As we can see, it's 9th May, this is done and our tractors are moving. Again, because all of the big fields have 150% from the previous times, the tractors will focus on the medium fields that I have over here. There we go, they have finished and now the fertility is at 150%. And now, around 70-ish May, they're gonna start sowing. Again, because I have manually assigned fields over here, they will do the sowing in the exact order from mentioned over here. Therefore, they're gonna do the sowing on the medium farms at a later date. Now that they finished with the big fields, now the medium fields get sown. And after finishing to sow everything, they will start using liquid fertilizer to raise the fertility rate. Basically, liquid fertilizing is not an urgent procedure. The most important procedure is the sowing. Once tractors manage to get it to 200%, well, due to me speeding it up, it looks like they didn't manage in time. Now we're gonna wait until end of July, beginning of August in order for the crops to grow. You're going to notice something interesting. Usually the growing process is somewhere until 1st of August. You might have noticed that the Siberian crops use a special Lenin concoction, since the grow times are identical between the default map and the Siberian map. But you're going to see that Lenin's special brew has its drawbacks when we are going to discuss the amounts harvested. For now, the harvesters will do the loop-de-loops around here and start harvesting everything. You're going to notice another thing. Basically, the end of sowing is when the winter starts. When does the first snow happen? Yes, you got it, somewhere at the beginning of October instead of November. That means you have a little bit less time to farm everything. This means the setup that we're gonna discuss in future topics, for Siberia it doesn't work. The maximum amount of big fields you can have is equal to the maximum amount of tractors. Therefore, these medium fields will never be harvested. As we can see over here, October began, boom, 12th of October, snow started pouring, and all of the crops over here have disappeared. And also all of the harvesters are returning back to base. moving on to the next topic. What is the best harvesters tractors to trucks ratio? Firstly, I want to talk about the fact that what I'm showing here is not a way to min-max everything. You're not going to have a magical flatland everywhere in your republic. Therefore, you need to mix and match big and medium fields and small fields as much as possible. Moreover, I personally don't recommend buying just harvesters and tractors inside your farm and then using one of the distribution offices in order to start delivering stuff. Well, why is that? This is because more tractors and harvesters equal more fields for you to do the work on them. More fields, it means that it occupies more space. Therefore, the tractors and harvesters will have a very good time reaching the 2 fields over here. However, if I'm placing way more fields, they will have a very bad time when they are reaching this field, because it takes a lot of time to reach over there, and also tractors by themselves are not that efficient when it comes to speed. The highest speed tractors have is 35 kilometers per hour. The combine, the highest speed they have is somewhere around 25 or 20. Another reason is that usually tractors, after finishing the sowing, and also combines the same, they are going to remain out of gas. Remaining out of gas can be fixed in 2 ways. 1. Return to the large farm to refuel, or 2. Have a gas station plonked somewhere along the road. Well, the problem with having gas stations in the middle of the fields is that you're going to need to refuel them, over complexifying your system with absolutely no reason and for small gains. Moreover, having trucks in a distribution office means that they are further away from your furthest farm. This means that they're gonna travel more, they're going to remain out of fuel faster, and their maintenance will go down way much more than if they would have been assigned directly to the farm, because the less fields you have, the shorter the distance. With that out of the way, let's keep things simple and only discuss about big fields. So, you saw the magic numbers 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 4. This means that for each harvester you buy, 1 harvester, 2 trucks, and 3 covered hulls. For the 1, 2, 4 setup, it means that you have 4 covered hulls. Now, let's explain logically why. Starting off with why you need 1 tractor per 1 big field plus medium field. Well, logically, you want to be done with solid fertilizing and sowing as fast as possible. There's absolutely no time to waste here. Therefore, you're going to use the same amount of tractors as big fields you got. This is because once they finish spreading the solid fertilizer, they can instantly start sowing right after. The faster you're done with sowing, the faster the crop grows, and the shorter the harvesting time gets pushed to earlier dates. Then, when it comes to harvesting, if you noticed in the previous topics, in regards to harvesting, this happens somewhere around August. Then end of harvesting happens somewhere around middle of November, when the snow starts to fall on the default maps. Since it takes roughly a month to a month and a half to do the harvesting, and you have a total of 4 months, you can harvest a total of 2 big fields using the same harvester, and left with some leeway time to harvest medium fields too. Therefore, in this case, you don't need more than 1 harvester to every 2 big fields and 1 or 2 medium fields. Now, comparing it with the tractors, as I mentioned, 1 tractor per big field. Now the harvesters is 1 harvester per 2 big fields. That is the 1-2 rule. Basically 1 harvester and 2 tractors. Also, For Siberia, because it's 3 months instead of 4 for harvesting time, since harvesting starts somewhere around August and ends somewhere around October, now you won't be able to harvest more than 2 big fields per combined harvester. So in Siberia, you don't need to lay out the medium fields. Let's discuss now the farming layout. We have over here a large farm. We know that the large farm itself can hold up to 30 vehicles. Let's take the scenario of 1, 2, 3 scheme. In this case, you're going to need a batch of 6 vehicles. 30/6 equals 5. Therefore, I know that I can do somewhere around 10 big fields per each big farm. So let's buy the vehicles and see logically how it happens. We're going to need 5 combines, then 10 tractors, and the rest will be covered tools until we get 30. Now we have 10 tractors. Remember the rule, a single tractor per 1 big field plus 1 or 2 medium fields, depends on the scenario. Therefore, I know I have 10 tractors, therefore 10 big fields. Let's plonk down 10 big fields. Usually I prefer to leave just a little bit of space when placing the fields, because I want to make sure that the vehicles that are waiting to collect the crops from over here, the covered tools, do not block the main road. So I go 1 big field here, 1 here, and then flip it around and do the same in the other scenario. We got 4 fields. Then I come back over here and do the same scenario yet again. There we go, we are done with the big fields. Now, if you play in Siberia, this is a good layout. If you play on a general map, then you can add bonus medium fields. So let's add them over here. Notice that the medium fields, I'm placing them in front of the farms, not behind the farm. This is because behind the farm we're gonna place something else. And now we should have a total of 10 fields. Good. Let's place the asphalt road. Also, it's important to use asphalt roads in your construction, because the covered tools over here, they have a maximum speed of 90 kilometers per hour. If you are using gravel roads, they will not abuse this maximum speed. Moreover, the small fields are only useful if you are using the highest capacity combines and tractors. If you're having a lower amount, then make sure that you're not including the medium fields and only sticking to the big fields. One more bonus, you can make sure that all of your roads are fully asphalt. Let's connect these also here. And on our farm, we had auto search enabled. This managed to connect all of the fields over here. I'm going to cancel the auto search, disable it, and manually assign fields by myself. Basically, I want to zigzag the fields so the vehicles, they do not collide with each other whenever they are picking stuff up. So I want to go like this, then go over here, and then come back. Notice that I have only selected the big fields. This is important because I want the big fields to be taken care of firstly. Medium fields are just a side note over here, and it seems like I have forgotten a road. Let's build that road now. Good. Now with the big fields done, let's do the medium fields. The same zigzagging pattern happens over here too. And these two sadly will remain one after another because I didn't properly do the zigzagging. But now the tractors will go to different places without colliding with each other. As you can see, everyone is happy. The same thing happens when harvesting starts. Moreover, now we need a place to store the grain. When it comes to storing the grain, you have multiple options over here. However, from my point of view, once we are discussing the amounts of crops you're going to have, you won't be reaching the 11,000 crops you are going to need for the entire year. I would prefer to have the large storage somewhere near my factories instead of the farm itself. Therefore, usually I go with a lower amount grain storage, which is also cheaper to build. Usually the 5,600 crops is more than enough. Or you can go balls deep and go with the 3.2 K tons of crops with ease. The only rule I want to emphasize over here is that you make sure that you use the ones with integrated rails. There's absolutely no reason for you to use the other ones which don't have rails. As you can see, when it comes to construction, it's just 10K more. I'm going to use a 5001 and connect it somewhere behind the factory over here. Good. Now, I have taken care of the storage problem. At the factory over here, we also need liquid fertilizer and solid fertilizer. And also fuel if you are playing with fuel enabled. One thing to mention over here. The liquid fertilizing happens once a year. The solid fertilizer happens even rarer, somewhere around once every 2 years, once every 3 years. That means you don't need an overcomplicated train management system to transport a shit ton of stuff to your farm. It's enough to have a distribution office somewhere around here or at the border or wherever you're producing your own fertilizer, and have for solid fertilizer you're going to need a garbage container, and when it comes to liquid fertilizer, just bring one of the oil tankers. That's all you're going to need. Basically, the amount of fertilizer over here is enough to cover 1 year. And after you've finished fertilizing, you got 1 full year to start refilling this up. Basically, what I'm trying to say, it's useless to have storages over here because they are just wasting construction materials and wasting repair time when they degrade. Moving on to the next topic, namely the difference between liquid fertilizer and solid fertilizer and also a layout for them, let's think logically. We saw in the previous topics that the order of farming is solid fertilizer, sowing, liquid fertilizer, harvesting. We also noticed that solid fertilizer is not always needed. Most likely it's more needed towards the beginning or every 2 or 3 years. Now let's discuss a factory layout for this. To be honest, you're better off just importing the stuff. There's absolutely no reason to make it yourself. However, if you want to have a self-sustaining republic, then by all means, here's the layout. You got a simple small warehouse that has 60 tons of chemicals. This is because both the composting plant and the synthetic fertilizer use very low amount of chemicals, 0.31 and 0.075. So you don't need an overly exaggerated thing. The only reason I have picked this warehouse is that it has at the ends the factory connections. Moreover, you're going to notice that the factory connections are forcefully going into the plants. For the fertilizer factory, notice that the water quality required is 85%. There's no reason for you to pull in pure water reserved for your citizens. Therefore, maybe 200-ish meters away, just build a small water well together with a water pumping station. It's enough to pump enough water into the synthetic fertilizer to not have problems. Then, when it comes to waste, everything gets pumped to a sewage discharge nearby. Basically, this is how it looks like behind the underground. Now, when it comes to the composting plant, it's a bit more tricky because you're going to need a dump with claw machine that inputs only the biological waste, and then you got the dump with claw machine that outputs only the fertilizer itself. Then simply have it connected here, and also if you're noticing over here, processing efficiency is 80% biological. That means that from these 30 tons, only 27-ish will be transformed into fertilizer, and the rest will be mixed waste. Simply burn off the mixed waste at an incinerator and you're done with it. No need for anything else. Moreover, you only need one factory of each, since that it will be enough fertilizer to satisfy all your farming needs for the entire map. Well, I've tried hunting around to see how much fertilizer you need for each big field, and the results are roughly around 10 tons of solid fertilizer per big field every 2 or 3 years, and roughly around 20 tons of liquid fertilizer per big field every single year. Now, since our factories are producing 25 tons of fertilizer each day, that means per 2 years you're going to have a total of 18,000 solid fertilizer, and that's a lot. That means you can cover 1,800 big fields and you won't run out of solid fertilizer. Moreover, when it comes to solid fertilizer, it's extremely cheap at the border, just a few rubles. There's absolutely no reason for you to waste 75 workers over here to produce solid fertilizer. Just get it from the border. A similar story is true with the synthetic fertilizer. Over here, you're producing 17 tons of liquid fertilizer per workday. This means that yearly you will have a production of 6,000 plus tons. That is way more than enough to cover around 300 big fields. Again, at the border, looking at the liquid fertilizer, it is slightly more expensive at around $38-ish to $40, but then again, you're not using that much. So there's absolutely no problem getting it from the border. At worst case scenario, if you're truly really want to produce it locally, go just for a liquid fertilizer and import the solid fertilizer in your republic. Now, with everything explained, let's see how many crops you expect per square acre. For this, it highly depends on the gameplay you went for. Let's assume that for all scenarios, we have the scenario with 100% fertility, and then we will cover the scenario of 200% fertility. Let's get started firstly with seasons. In all type of maps except Siberia, with seasons enabled, you're looking to get roughly 62 tons per acre at 100% or 124 tons at 200%. In Siberian maps, you're looking at roughly 18 tons per acre at 100% fertility or 38 to 40 tons per acre at 200%. Yes, who would have thunk that plants do not grow well in Siberia? With seasons turned off completely, in all maps you will get roughly 25 tons per acre at 100% or 50 tons per acre at 200% regardless of the map you are playing on. The advantage here is that you will get multiple farming cycles in a year, somewhere around 3 cycles. Also, a small mention, if you are playing with seasons off, then instead of the 1-2-3 rule, go with the 2-2-3 rule instead. You are going to need to finish harvesting as fast as sown. So you need the same amount of harvesters as the tractors. Let's now discuss how many farms or acres you're going to need per factory. This one will make more sense in the next video, where we're going to cover clothing, food, meat and alcohol. But to me, it made more sense to explain the math here. Let's take the fabric factory as an example. You're going to understand why I picked the fabric factory and not food, alcohol or meat in the next one. But for now, you're going to need 20 tons of crops per day. To keep it fully running the full year at max capacity, that means you're going to need 20 times 365 days equals 7,300 crops per year. Now let's discuss about seasons enabled. You know that you're going to produce 124 crops per acre. This means you're going to need 7,300 / 124 equals 59 acres in total. Therefore, this means you'll need a total of around 13 big fields to cover all your needs. 59 / 4.8, it's 13. If you're playing with seasons disabled, you know you're harvesting almost 3 times per year instead of once. Therefore, the math changes. 7,300 / 50 times 3 equals somewhere around 48 acres in total. Meaning you're going to need just 10 big fields for this. For a simple formula, acres equal consumption times 365 / fertility / production per year. And if you're looking for the one without seasons enabled, simply add the /3 at the end. And that's kind of all about farming. Remember to leave a comment down below of the things you've learned from this guide, and also hit that like button. Also, the next guide is going to be all about the things you're going to do with crops and a industry layout for it. Well, I'm gonna exclude chemicals since I already made a chemicals industry layout. Check it here if you haven't done so yet, but stay subscribed so you're gonna see that. Until next time, I'm the Honey Badger and I'm out.